The alarms were screaming. Something was loose in the vents, something from the most dangerous planet in the galaxy, Earth. The scanner was jumping wildly. It read, Level 5 Deathworld Predator. We were already dead, we just didn't know it yet. Through the darkness, we saw them. Two golden orbs of fire watching us from the vents. It didn't blink. It was studying our fear. Then came the sound. A low, rhythmic rumble that felt like a powerful engine warming up. To us, it sounded like a death sentence. It crouched low, muscles tensing like a coiled spring. In a blur of orange fire, the shadow launched itself directly at us, but as the lights flickered on, we saw the truth. This was Leo. And the human was holding a bag of treats. The Galactic University of Xylos was known for its peace and high-level learning. But tonight, peace was gone. The red emergency lights flickered along the metallic walls of the research wing. A loud, sharp alarm echoed through the halls. Beep. 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 For the 4 alien students trapped inside Lab 4, it sounded like a countdown to their death. They were far from home, and they were terrified. Zell, the leader of the group, gripped a small handheld scanner. His blue skin was turning a pale gray, a sign of extreme fear in his species. Behind him, Vora was shaking. She came from a planet with no predators and no violence. To her, even the darkness felt like a weapon. The 2 other students, Cax and Tix, stood close together. They were staring at the ceiling. They had heard something moving in the ventilation ducts, something fast, something heavy, and something that did not belong here. What does the scanner say? Vora whispered. Her voice was barely a breath. Zell looked down at the screen. The numbers were jumping wildly. The energy signature was off the charts. It says, Level 5 Deathworld Predator, Zell replied. The group gasped. Earth was the only known Level 5 Deathworld. Anything that came from Earth was designed by nature to kill. They had heard stories of Earth's monsters, but they had never seen one. Until now, suddenly, a sound filled the room. It was not a roar or a scream. It was a low, vibrating rumble. Purr. 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 To the aliens, it sounded like a powerful engine warming up. It was a rhythmic, heavy sound that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. Is it an engine? Tix asked, his 4 eyes searching the shadows. No, Zell whispered. It is a warning. It is the sound of a predator enjoying the hunt. The flickering lights died for a moment, leaving the lab in total darkness. In that second, they saw it. High up near the open vent, 2 glowing yellow orbs appeared. They were eyes. They did not blink. They were cold, golden, and focused. A flash of orange fur moved through the shadows. It looked like a streak of frozen fire. The creature was small, but it moved with a grace that suggested perfect lethality. It didn't make a sound as it walked across the metal beams. It was a silent ghost that it's hunting us, Cax whimpered. He pulled a heavy metal tool from a table to use as a club. But his hands were shaking so much he almost dropped it. The orange shadow moved again. It was now directly above them. They could see the outline of its head. It had pointed ears that rotated toward them like radar dishes. Every time the scanner beeped, the creature's eyes seemed to glow brighter. It was watching their fear. It was studying their weakness. The students backed away into the corner of the lab. They pushed themselves against the cold wall, hoping the shadows would hide them. But there was no hiding from a deathworlder. The orange beast let out a soft sound. It wasn't the rumble from before. It was a sharp, short noise. Meow. To the students, this was the final battle cry. They closed their eyes and waited for the sharp claws to tear through their spacesuits. They waited for the end. The creature crouched low, its powerful back legs tensed. It was ready to spring. The air felt heavy with tension. Just as the orange beast began its leap, the heavy security doors of the lab hissed open. Bright, warm white light flooded the room, blinding the alien students. A tall figure stepped inside. It was Commander Miller, the human head of security. He wasn't wearing his combat gear or carrying a pulse rifle. He was wearing a bathrobe and holding a small plastic bag. "Leo," the human shouted, his voice echoing in the silent lab. "Get down from there right now. You know you aren't allowed in the vents." The monster stopped mid-motion. The terrifying yellow eyes softened. The orange beast let out a long, bored yawn, showing tiny white teeth, and lightly hopped down onto a table. It began to lick its paw as if nothing had happened. The alien students stood frozen, their mouths open, staring at the small, fuzzy animal that they thought was their ending. The silence in the room was heavy. Zell, Vora, and the others did not move from the corner. Their hearts were still beating fast, but their eyes were wide with confusion. They looked at the creature sitting on the table. It was small. It was bright orange. It was currently busy licking its own leg with a pink, sandpaper-like tongue. This was the Level 5 Deathworld Predator they had been warned about. It looked less like a monster and more like a soft, fuzzy pillow. The terrifying orange shadow from the vents was now just a tiny ball of fur. "Commander Miller," Zell said, his voice still shaking. "There must be a mistake. Our sensors detected a massive threat. We thought we were going to be eaten." Zell stepped closer, squinting his eyes at Leo. The cat stopped licking its leg and looked at Zell. Leo's ears flicked once, and he let out a tiny, high-pitched noise. It was almost a chirp. To the aliens, this was the most confusing thing they had ever seen. On their planets, predators were 10 feet tall with hundreds of teeth and glowing green slime. This, Leo, looked like something a child would play with. Vora stepped forward too, her fear turning into a strange kind of laughter. "Is this a joke? Is this a pet for human children?" she asked. She reached out a hand to touch the soft orange fur. Commander Miller's face suddenly turned very pale. He didn't move to stop her, but his voice became very cold and sharp. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said. Vora stopped her hand just inches away from Leo's head. The cat didn't move, but his eyes were now fixed on Vora's fingers. His pupils were widening, turning into two black holes that seemed to swallow the light of the room. "Why?" Vora asked, looking back at the commander. "He is so small. He has no armor. He has no venomous stingers. How can this be a Deathworld creature?" Miller walked over and stood next to the table. He didn't pet the cat. Instead, he kept a respectful distance. "You see his color?" Miller asked. "He is a ginger. On Earth, we have a joke that all ginger cats share one single brain cell. But that is the danger. He does not think like a normal animal. He does not feel fear. He does not understand the laws of physics. He is a chaotic force of nature." The students looked at each other. They didn't understand the joke, but they saw the serious look in the commander's eyes. Miller continued, "Earth is a death world because everything there is trying to kill you. To survive on Earth, you have to be faster, smarter, or more insane than the thing trying to eat you. Leo is all three. His species has been living with humans for 10,000 years. We didn't domesticate them. They decided to live with us because we have kitchens. But deep down, they are still the perfect hunting machines. To demonstrate, Miller took a small laser pointer from his pocket. He pressed the button, and a tiny red dot appeared on the floor. In less than a millisecond, Leo transformed. He didn't just move, he exploded. He vanished from the table and reappeared on the floor, his claws dug into the metal plating exactly where the red dot was. The speed was so great that the alien's eyes couldn't even follow the movement. One moment he was sitting, the next, he was a blur of orange fury. The sound of his claws hitting the metal sounded like small knives. Cax jumped back, nearly falling over a chair. What was that? Did he just teleport? Miller shook his head. No. That is just his reaction time. Your species takes 1 second to react to a threat. Leo takes 20 milliseconds. By the time you realize he is attacking, the fight is already over. Leo was now wiggling his back end, preparing to pounce on the dot again. His tail was whipping back and forth like a frustrated snake. The aliens noticed that his claws were not always out. They were retractable, hidden weapons that stayed sharp because they were tucked away. That he looks different now, Vora whispered. She noticed that the cute look was gone. Leo's body was tense, his muscles rippling under the orange fur. He looked like a spring that was coiled too tight. The human commander looked at the students and gave them a final warning. Tomorrow, you will study him in the controlled environment. But remember this, do not look him in the eye for too long. Do not try to pick him up. And most importantly, do not let him get behind you. To us, he is Leo. To the rest of the galaxy, he is a biological weapon that likes to sleep 18 hours a day. As Miller led the students out of the lab, Zell looked back one last time. Leo was sitting perfectly still again, watching the door. The red emergency lights were still flickering, and for a second, Zell saw that orange shadow again. The cat wasn't just sitting, he was waiting. The aliens realized that their disappointment was their biggest mistake. They had been looking at his size, but they should have been looking at his soul. The Deathworlder was not a monster because of its size, it was a monster because of its perfection. The next morning, the students gathered in the advanced biology observation deck. They were separated from Leo by a thick wall of reinforced plasma glass. On their side of the glass, high-tech computers and holographic screens were ready to analyze every inch of the creature. Commander Miller was there too, drinking a cup of coffee and looking very relaxed. However, the students were not relaxed. They had spent the night reading about Earth's history, and they were beginning to realize that the ginger cat was a master of survival. Zell activated the deep tissue pulse scanner. A soft blue light passed over Leo, who was currently busy chasing his own tail in a circle. On the screens, a 3D model of Leo's skeleton appeared. The students gasped. The skeleton was not rigid like theirs. It looked like it was made of liquid. Look at the collarbone. Vora pointed at the screen. It is not attached to the rest of the skeleton. It's floating in the muscle. Miller nodded, smiling. That is why he can fit through any hole that is as wide as his head. If his head fits, the body follows. He is a liquid predator. The scanner then zoomed in on Leo's paws. The students saw the internal mechanism of the retractable claws. To the aliens, this was terrifying. Most predators in the galaxy had claws that were always visible, which made them easy to spot. But Leo's claws were hidden inside soft, silent pads of fur. He walks on silence, Cax whispered, watching the hologram. He carries 10 hidden daggers, and you never see them until they are inside your throat. The computer labeled the claws as Grade A organic ceramic, meaning they were strong enough to shred alien alloys. Next, they analyzed Leo's ears. The sensors picked up frequencies that were so high the alien equipment almost couldn't record them. Tix, the smallest student, checked the data twice. He isn't just listening to us talk, Tix said, his voice trembling. He can hear the electrical hum of the lights. He can hear the blood moving through our veins. He can hear the friction of our skin when we move. The realization hit them hard. In a dark room, you could not hide from this creature. He would hear your heartbeat before you even knew he was there. The most shocking discovery came when they scanned Leo's eyes. The holographic display showed a layer behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum. It's a mirror, Zell explained to the others. He doesn't just see in the dark, he captures every single photon of light and reflects it back to see twice. His eyes are biological night vision goggles. The students looked through the glass at Leo. The cat stopped chasing his tail and looked back at them. Even through the thick glass, his golden eyes seemed to pierce right through their souls. It felt like being watched by an ancient, Hungry God.to test his physical limits, the students decided to drop a small, heavy metal ball from the ceiling of the chamber. They wanted to see how he reacted to a sudden threat. They didn't tell Miller. They just pressed the button. The ball dropped at a speed of 50 feet per second. Leo was looking the other way, seemingly asleep. But the moment the ball left the ceiling, Leo's ears twisted. Without even turning his head, he flipped his body in midair. It was a move that defied the laws of gravity. He didn't just move, he performed a perfect acrobatic twist. Before the ball could hit the floor, Leo caught it. He didn't use his mouth. He used his front paws, grabbing the ball with his claws out, and landed silently on all 4 feet. He then dropped the ball and looked at the glass, right at the students. He let out a low, vibrating growl that made the glass rattle. It wasn't a meow this time. It was a warning. He knew they had tested him, and he didn't like it. The one brain cell, Ginger, was gone. In its place was a calculated killing machine that had just caught a projectile in midair. Commander Miller put down his coffee and walked over to the controls. His face was no longer smiling. "I told you not to mess with him," he said quietly. "He doesn't like games unless he is the one starting them." The students watched as Leo began to sharpen his claws on a scratching post in the corner. The sound was like a saw cutting through wood. They realized that their science was just confirming what the humans already knew. Earth didn't create animals, it created biological weapons, and the ginger cat was the most beautiful and dangerous one of all. The calm of the laboratory was suddenly shattered by a sound that no one on the station ever wanted to hear. It was a deep, metallic grinding noise, followed by the screaming of emergency sirens. The bright white lights of the observation deck turned into a pulsing, angry red. "Structural breach in Sector 7, the computer voice shouted. The alien students froze. Sector 7 was the ventilation hub directly above them. Suddenly, the ceiling panels groaned and snapped. A massive, dark shape fell from the vents and landed heavily on the floor, blocking the only exit. The creature was a void crawler, a parasitic insectoid from the deep vacuum of space. It was the size of a large dog, covered in a black, oily shell that looked like jagged glass. It had 6 long, spindly legs ending in poison spikes, and its face was nothing but a mess of clicking mandibles and a dozen black eyes. The students screamed. Zell tried to activate the emergency security shield, but the void crawler let out an ultrasonic shriek that fried the electronics. The room went dark, lit only by the pulsing red emergency strobe. They were trapped in the dark with a nightmare. "Don't move," Zell whispered, his voice cracking with terror. "It tracks movement." The students huddled together behind a research desk, their eyes fixed on the black monster. The void crawler began to move, its legs clicking on the metal floor like the ticking of a death clock. It sniffed the air, its mandibles dripping with a green, acidic foam. It was a professional killer, a predator that had hunted across 100 star systems. The aliens' high-tech weapons were useless in the dark. They were defenseless, waiting to be the creature's next meal, but there was one thing they had forgotten. In the middle of the room, inside the glass chamber, Leo was no longer sleeping. The ginger chaos had arrived. When the lights went out, the cat didn't panic. While the aliens were blinded by the darkness, Leo's eyes adjusted instantly. To him, the room was as bright as day. He didn't see a terrifying space monster, he saw a very large, very interesting bug. His tail began to twitch. It was a slow, rhythmic movement, the sign of a predator that had found the ultimate toy. The void crawler turned its head toward the glass chamber. It sensed life inside. With a powerful strike, it slammed its spiked leg into the reinforced glass. The glass, already weakened by the power surge, began to crack. Spiderweb lines raced across the surface. The students gasped as the barrier between them and the two predators began to crumble. With one final, massive blow, the glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. The void crawler stepped into the chamber, ready to crush the small orange animal inside. The students waited for Leo to run. They waited for him to hiss or hide. But Leo did something much more terrifying. He stood up slowly and arched his back, making himself look twice his actual size. He let out a sound that wasn't a meow or a purr. It was a deep, guttural growl that sounded like a tectonic plate shifting deep underground. His fur stood on end, and his eyes were pitch black, reflecting the red emergency lights. He looked less like a pet and more like a demon made of orange fire. The void crawler hesitated. It was an ancient hunter, and its instincts were screaming at it to stop. It looked at the small cat and saw something it didn't understand. It saw a creature from a level 5 deathworld that was not afraid of it. Leo didn't back away. Instead, he took a step forward, his paws silent on the broken glass. He began to make a chattering sound with his teeth, a sound cats make when they are about to kill birds. To the aliens, it sounded like a ritualistic war cry. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The air felt cold and heavy. The students watched, breathless, as the tiny ginger cat stared down the giant insect from the void. For the first time in their lives, the aliens understood what Deathworld really meant. It didn't mean big monsters or loud explosions. It meant a tiny, soft creature that could look at a nightmare and decide to hunt it. Leo crouched low, his back legs tensing, his claws sliding out of his paws like silver needles. The real fight was about to begin. The void crawler lost its patience first. With a terrifying shriek that sounded like metal scraping against metal, it lunged forward. Its long, spiked front legs stabbed at the spot where Leo was standing. The alien students screamed, certain that the small ginger cat would be crushed instantly. But Leo was no longer there. To the human eye, he was a blur. To the aliens, he seemed to simply vanish. He didn't jump away in fear, he jumped up. Using the falling ceiling panels as a bridge, Leo launched himself into the air, spinning like a feathered orange dart. He landed perfectly on the back of the monster's oily black neck, his claws locking into the gaps of its armor. The void crawler spun in circles, hissed, and tried to shake the tiny predator off. It slammed its body against the lab tables, trying to crush Leo, but the cat was like water. Every time the monster hit a surface, Leo shifted his weight, his body absorbing the shock with impossible flexibility. The aliens watched in total shock. They had seen many hunters, but they had never seen something so small fight something so big with such confidence. Leo wasn't just surviving, he was attacking. He began to use his back legs in a rapid, blurring motion, the bunny kick. His sharp claws acted like organic saws, ripping through the soft joints of the insect's neck. Green fluid sprayed from the monster's wounds, and it let out a cry of pure agony. The void crawler was a creature that fed on fear, but it couldn't find any fear in Leo. The cat's pupils were so wide that his eyes looked like solid black voids. There was no mercy in those eyes, only the ancient, cold calculations of a species that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of the kill. The monster tried to reach back with its venomous stingers, but Leo was too fast. He nipped at the insect's antennae, blinding its sensors and leaving it confused in the dark room. The predator of the stars was being dismantled by a household pet. What horrified the alien students the most was not the violence, but the way Leo acted. He didn't look like he was fighting for his life. He looked like he was having the time of his life. Between every strike, Leo would let out a short, excited chirp. To the aliens, this was the ultimate psychological horror. He is playing with it, Vora whispered, her voice trembling. That monster is a nightmare from the deep vacuum, and the cat thinks it is a toy. This was the true terror of a deathworlder. They didn't just kill their enemies, they found joy in the hunt. The fight moved across the room in a chaotic dance of orange and black. Leo was using the entire environment to his advantage. He hopped off the monster, ran up a vertical wall, and dropped back down with a precision that no computer could calculate. He was targeting the void crawler's legs one by one. With every leap, another spiked limb was disabled. The giant insect was now limping, its movements slowing down as it lost more of its green blood. It tried to retreat toward the ventilation shaft, desperate to escape the orange demon it had accidentally challenged. But Leo was not finished yet. With a final, powerful leap, Leo landed directly on the monster's head. He bit down hard on the main nerve bundle behind its eyes. The void crawler gave one last, violent shake and then collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. It was dead. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the fight. Leo stood on top of the fallen giant, his orange fur stained with green fluid. He didn't celebrate. He didn't roar. He simply sat down on the head of his enemy and began to calmly lick the green blood off his right paw. The ginger shadow had won, and he wasn't even out of breath. The alien student stayed hidden behind the desk for a long time, too afraid to move. They looked at the dead monster, then at the small cat, and then at each other. Their world had changed in the last 10 minutes. They realized that the universe was much more dangerous than they thought, but not because of the giant monsters in the dark. It was dangerous because humans had brought their friends from Earth. As Leo finished cleaning himself, he looked toward the students and let out a soft, friendly meow. For the first time, the aliens didn't find it cute. They found it the most intimidating sound in the galaxy. The red emergency lights finally stopped pulsing, replaced by the steady, cool white glow of the station's backup power. The room was deathly silent, except for the faint sound of Leo's sandpaper tongue grooming his fur. The alien students slowly stood up from behind the desk, their legs still trembling. They looked at the massive body of the void crawler. It was a creature that should have killed them all, yet it lay defeated by a 10-pound ball of orange fluff. Zell looked at his scanner one last time. The danger reading was still flashing, but it wasn't pointing at the dead insect anymore. It was pointing at Leo. The heavy lab doors hissed open, and Commander Miller rushed in with a security team. They were armed with heavy pulse rifles, ready for a war. But when Miller saw the scene, he stopped instantly. He didn't look at the dead monster with fear or surprise. He looked at the green fluid on the floor, then at Leo, and let out a long, tired sigh. "Damn it, Leo," Miller muttered, rubbing his eyes. "I just had this floor polished yesterday." He walked over to the cat, who was still sitting on the monster's head, and picked him up by the middle. The alien students gasped, expecting the cat to turn and shred the human's arms. But Leo didn't attack. He immediately turned back into a pillow. He went limp in Miller's arms, let out a loud, happy purr, and started rubbing his head against the human's chin. The transformation was terrifying to the aliens. How could a creature go from a cold-blooded assassin to a loving companion in a matter of seconds? "Commander," Zell said, his voice a whisper. That thing. It killed a void crawler. Alone. Without a weapon." Miller looked at Zell and then at the dead bug. "Yeah, they do that," Miller said casually, as if he were talking about the weather. "Back on Earth, we have a saying, the cat is the only animal that can kill you, but chooses not to because you provide the snacks. They are perfect predators, Zell. We brought them into our homes thousands of years ago to protect our food from pests. Eventually, they became our friends. But never forget that they are still from Earth. Their bodies are built for the hunt, and their minds are built for chaos." Vora stepped forward, looking at Leo with a mix of horror and deep respect. "We thought he was a mistake. We thought he was too small to be a deathworlder," she said. Miller nodded. "That's the mistake everyone makes. Humans are the dominant species on Earth, but cats. Cats are the secret owners. They don't need size when they have speed and no fear. In the galaxy, orange usually means a warning of fire or poison. On Earth, being orange just means you have one brain cell, and that brain cell is dedicated entirely to violence and naps. As the security team began to drag the heavy carcass of the void crawler away, the students realized something important. Humans were not just friends with cats. They were partners with them. The humans provided the technology and the reach to the stars, and the cats provided the ancient, raw protection that technology could never replace. If a small ginger cat could do this to a space monster, the aliens began to wonder what a human was truly capable of if pushed to the edge. The presence of the cat was a silent message to the rest of the galaxy. We are from a death world, and we brought our monsters with us. Before leaving the lab, Zell approached Miller. Will he be okay? He asked, looking at Leo's green-stained fur. Miller smiled and scratched Leo behind the ears. Leo closed his eyes and looked perfectly peaceful. He'll be fine. He just needs a bowl of milk and a 16-hour nap. But I'd suggest you all buy some heavy-duty gloves if you ever plan on giving him a bath. That is a battle even I am not brave enough to fight. Miller laughed and walked out of the room, the small orange hunter resting on his shoulder. The 4 students stood in the empty, broken lab. They looked at the scratches on the floor and the shattered glass. They would never look at a cute animal the same way again. They had learned the most valuable lesson the Galactic University could offer: size is a lie, and fluff is a mask. From that day on, whenever an alien saw a ginger cat, they didn't try to pet it. They stood back, lowered their heads in respect, and made sure they didn't have any laser pointers in their pockets. Because in the dark corners of the universe, the Red Shadow was always watching.